Hi, I'm Lin Fritschi and I'm a professor in the School of Public Health at Curtin University. I'm very honoured to be awarded the title of John Curtin Distinguished Professor and to share with you a flavour of my research. I'm an epidemiologist. Epidemiology is the study of patterns and causes of disease in human populations. The word epidemiology comes from the same root as the word epidemic, and the original epidemiologists studied causes and patterns of infectious diseases in populations. And now epidemiologists are also studying causes and patterns of chronic diseases such as cancer, which is my area. I like epidemiology because epidemiological methods can be applied to a wide variety of different questions, and so I get a lot of variation in my work. It also involves a lot of logical thinking to work out how to do complex study designs, and also epidemiological studies have a direct impact on society. My journey started with a medical degree, after which I worked as a doctor for a few years, mainly in busy emergency departments. And more I started thinking that it was more sensible to prevent disease occurring rather than try to cure it at the end. But in order to prevent disease, you need to know what causes it, and that's where epidemiology comes in. So I did a PhD in epidemiology, followed by a postdoc in Montreal, Canada, where I worked with Jack Semioticky, who's one of the gurus of occupational epidemiology and has really had an influence over my whole career. My research is about whether work gives you cancer and how we can stop those cancers occurring. We've estimated that there are about 5,000 cancers a year in Australia that are caused by work, and so it's a really important problem. Mostly we look at whether particular chemicals cause cancer. In these studies, we recruit cases, so people who have cancer, and controls who don't have cancer. And then we look back over their occupational history to see whether they're exposed to a particular chemical. One of my first studies looked at pesticides and lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer. And we found that people who sprayed pesticides were at an increased risk of lymphoma, but only if they used a lot of pesticides. So this is important because it means if you go out now and again to spray your roses, you're not really increasing your risk of cancer. The people who are increasing the risk of cancer are people who mix pesticides, who spray it day after day, who clean up the equipment after spraying, and they're the ones where we need to prevent exposure, so put in the control measures. Studies like this have led to some really interesting opportunities for me. I've been on a number of expert panels for the World Health Organization, and in these panels what we do is we review all the literature on a particular chemical and make a decision as to whether that chemical is carcinogenic or not. And the decisions the expert panels make have huge implications because they're automatically accepted into legislation in a number of different countries, and that has flow-on effects for compensation. However, a few years ago I started thinking that it was all very interesting to find out about these new causes of cancer, but in real workplaces people are still being exposed to carcinogens, things that we know cause cancer and that we know how to prevent. So why are they still being exposed? And one of the issues is that traditionally a lot of the emphasis in occupational health research and in occupational health regulation has been on the big companies in the traditionally dirty industries. So as a result of that, OC health and safety is a priority for these industries, and they often have in-house OC health and safety expertise, and they work hard to make sure that they meet the standards. But 70% of the Australian workplace are in small and medium-sized enterprises, and often those companies don't have expertise in OC health and safety, and it's not a priority for them. That led to the second area of my research, finding out who's exposed to carcinogens at work and how we can stop this exposure. We've developed a new way for determining who's exposed to carcinogens, looking at it on a national level, not just in the big companies. Using this method, we showed that about 40% of Australian workers are exposed to carcinogens in their current job. So think about that for a minute. That means out of every 5 workers, 2 of them go to work and they're exposed to something that causes cancer at their work. The major exposures are solar UV or sun exposure, diesel engine exhaust and silica. We're going on to develop new methods to model different prevention approaches to see which one has the biggest effect to prevent occupational cancer. We've also gone on to expand this methodology into different hazards such as asthmagens, noise and psychosocial hazards at work, and also we've been looking at subgroups of the population such as migrants, and that work has been led by my colleague Alison Reid. There are also a number of international collaborations which use this method. So these are the 2 areas of empirical research that I do, identifying new carcinogens and working out who's exposed to carcinogens at work. Underlying both these areas of research is a need to assess exposure in the workplace. And we've got to do this in large numbers of people in a huge range of jobs. There hasn't really been a good way to do this up until now. As you can imagine, going into multiple workplaces and trying to take 20 to 30 air monitoring devices is really not practical. And asking people about their exposures also doesn't work because a lot of people don't really know what exposures they have at work. So over the last decade, I've been developing an online tool called OccIDEAS. It's based on asking people what they do at work, not what they're exposed to, and people can answer those questions. So my innovation was to use computers to take those answers and use algorithms to then decide what they're exposed to. OccIDEAS fills a unique niche in research studies. It can be used to assess exposures in the past, such as in our pesticide study, and it can be used to assess exposures in large numbers of people in a wide range of different jobs, including in small and medium-sized enterprises. Currently, OccIDEAS is being used in a number of Australian and international studies, including the Australian Mesothelioma Registry and in a large study called Asia Lymph, where they're recruiting 6,000 people in China, and that's being led by the US National Cancer Institute. The European Union Occupational Health and Safety Authority is also looking at using OccIDEAS in a pan-European survey. In the future, I aim to expand my research to look at occupational exposures in developing countries, where the need is often greater and the priority is often low. I'd also like to adapt OccIDEAS to be more than just a tool to be used in research studies, but also something that can be used by individual workers to assess their own hazards in their own workplaces and to work out what they can do to prevent their exposure. I'd like to commercialise this use of OccIDEAS to put the whole research program on a more sustainable financial footing, as upgrading and maintaining IT is really not something that it's easy to get a grant to do. And that's meant that OccIDEAS is not really quite as good as I'd like it to be, just with a little bit of additional investment. My research program has been really successful, with over $20 million in funding over the last 20 years, mainly from the NHMRC, and I've just hit my 250th peer-reviewed publication. But the thing I'm the most proud of is my amazing team, without whom I could not do what I do, and they're the real leaders in occupational epidemiology in the future. I'd like to leave you with the message that workers' health should not be damaged by their job, and with the knowledge that Curtin University is at the forefront of research to make sure that workplaces are safe.